Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Sikarsky,
And I'm Jason Michael Primrose.
and welcome to Gentlemen, the number one podcast for open-hearted leadership.
I just get excited when you say that. How are you feeling this morning, Jeff? What are you celebrating?
Well, I'm celebrating us being episode 2. Actually, I guess technically it's 4 of this podcast, how we're breaking it up. Celebrating having Nicholas on this call with us. And I'm celebrating a really great conversation you and I got to have this morning around different layers of partnership. And as we're learning to develop how this thing goes at, I'm so used to going at things alone, and I'm really not doing that anymore. And as a result of it, I'm learning this whole new way of partnering and interacting with people. So I got the pleasure of being in like a little bit of a breakdown this morning and it's sort of recalibrating and being able to still get this podcast off. So definitely celebrating a lot over here.
Yeah, I'm celebrating. I'm celebrating being stood for, which was awesome in our breakdown. You being like, "This is not the person I know you to be." And we'll talk about that too. But yeah, I'm celebrating episode 4. I'm celebrating deep conversation and unity, and I'm also celebrating $18,000 on my Kickstarter.
Nice.
So we were like, this book is getting published. I'm super excited about that. So yeah. Before we get into today's episode, if you want more in the form of community, you can follow us on Gentlemen the Podcast or join our private group on Facebook by searching Gentlemen the Podcast.
So this is our second conversation around the topic of intention. You might say, well, why is it the second? So basically the way Jason and I are creating a lot of this format is that him and I are going to get together and have a little bit of a conversation ourselves. And then we're going to invite a guest into our space who we think would provide a lot of value to our listeners, to us, and people that are along the journey of either enhancing who they are as a gentleman or who are even interested in starting on the journey. And one of the things we were talking about earlier, these different pillars. So, if you listen to past couple episodes, we were talking about vision, and now we're talking about intention. And the way that we plan to build these conversations is that every single pillar will build on the previous one. So without further ado, I want to introduce who's already on the stage from a really amazing looking studio, Nicholas Bayerle, who is the CEO and owner of the $1 Billion Brotherhood. He is in charge of the $1 Billion Body. He has been helping transform the lives of men for some time now. And he's really perfect for this episode because of how he has used intention along his journey. And I think that he does he's really great at articulating things in a way that people can digest. And so he's really a leader in this world. We're really excited to have him here. There's so much more that makes up who this man is, and I'm sure he's going to tell us all a little bit about it. So Nicholas, I think it's really common in this world to ask people like, well, who are you? And we all start off by saying, well, this is what I do. And, this is what I've built and all of this kind of stuff. But I'd also like to share with our listeners, like who you are as a man, who you are as a father, who you are as a business owner, like the deeper side of who Nicholas is.
For me, when I think about like the purest form of who I am, which this is very different than the normal trainings or interviews or things I get to do, the energy, that dynamic, the frame. So I want to roll with this like fun genre, I think I would call it. So when I really look at who I am from when I was very little, the purest form to who I am now, and I take personality tests now to kind of figure out and put little tiny definitions on, oh yeah, that's me or that's not me. And I look at things that have been the same from when I was 3, 4, 5 years old to that have brought to who I am today. And then the shifts that have made as well. The two things I want to say is me in the purest form is legitimately just someone who is exploring wildly things that I can master and get better at and a challenge that I could take on. Everything that I've done in my life has simply been done because I just have this thing where I just cannot take my eyes off of something. I see it in my son Kingston now. He has this little iPad from Amazon that if he wants something, he'll watch the same episode, 22 episodes over and over again of Pink Fong, because he just looks at it and he's like, I just have to get more of this. And when I look at everything I've done in my life, it's been this overwhelming thing that takes over my body that sometimes needs some directing as well and refining, where I just am obsessed with stuff. I just get purely and radically obsessed with things, and that's what I've been my whole life. I want to put a little bit of a frame about what's going on here, is that my life was changed very negatively really quickly from one moment when I was about 13 years old. And it set me on a different course in life. It was almost like I was like a pinball. I was on one course. I hit something, I got knocked by something, and it put me on a different course. And the one thing I've learned over the years now is that anything that can happen negatively can also happen positively as well, just as quick. So there's like always this ebb and flow of like this negative things that can happen. You're like, well, if things can turn for the bad really quickly, which they all can, we've all experienced that. All of us have, everyone out there has experienced failure. Not everyone feels like they've experienced a level of success, especially if we increase the levels of success. But everyone recognizes hardship or depression or any of these things. We've all experienced that. And so the opposite side is knowing that our life can transform for the positive in one moment, and that all change happens in one moment. All of it. The person who quit smoking, they quit in a moment. There's that final moment that all of a sudden they just quit smoking or they quit drinking. Whatever it is that they're changing with, there's always that one moment where it changed. It just sometimes takes a long time for people to finally have the one moment. But also giving yourself the ability here to not feel overwhelmed by what we're going to talk about, yet sticking to the end, because that's where we're going to have the breakthroughs here that'll shift everything forever. And also knowing that it's okay for you to change in an instant. It doesn't have to be a long process. Even if it's been a long process for you in the past, that just means you've been taking a long time to get to that point where change happens in an instant. But you've already been doing it. So we'll just change for the positive in an instant. And also knowing that change isn't being someone different. It's actually just being more of who you are. All we're doing is just, it's gold. Gold unrefined is not valuable. Gold refined is very valuable. Same amount of gold in unrefined gold as refined gold. Same amount. Just impurities are taken out. That's it. And that's usually done through refining fire, which is also not that fun. But it also looks really awesome at the end of the day. Over the years, I've realized that the biggest change is I've been able to direct that in a better way and know what things are actually going to go with that core vision. We were talking about intention, and even just the Google definition of intention is a thing intended, an aim or plan. And all of us have this plan or this place we want to end up in life. And I feel and I think that oftentimes what happens is we allow a lot of just our feelings and compulsive behavior to derail us from those things. And so knowing the balance of, is this in line with the place that I actually want to go? And it goes to something that I actually talked with one of our coaching students yesterday, 2 days ago now, is we were sitting there and I was like, man, like our life changes and my life changes today when I really ask myself, what does it look like for me to take responsibility in this moment when something new pops up? I'm a new father, so a whole new world that I have not mastered, that I'm like, all right, where does it look like to take responsibility when my son's falling and he hits his lip on the floor? And I'm like, what the hell? What's going on? I get angry, right? I'm upset because like, how could I let that happen? Mm-hmm. And instead of blaming other people or all these, I have to ask myself again, like, what does it look like for me to take responsibility in this moment and take responsibility for everything in my life, knowing that everything in my life is my fault. If I'm out of shape like I was, 60 pounds overweight, it's my fault. If I'm in shape, it's my fault. You get both sides of it, yet that's the basis point of even intention, anything. Nothing works without that foundation, first off, of knowing, man, like everything is my fault. Everything, if I look at the world, the only way it's going to change my world is by taking that responsibility. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I have a defining moment that happened for me and if it wasn't for that one moment, I would not be on the show. Jeff and I wouldn't be connected. So hopefully we'll get into it here.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that. Okay, I got to go back. We got to go back. So first of all, you said two things. about your childhood. And I only heard one. So what I heard was curiosity.
Totally.
And so this like curiosity, this like drive, this diligence, which we share, I have like always been like, I'm gonna figure it out. Like no matter what, I'll figure it out. So I love that. And I'm curious what the second thing is.
It's very difficult to ascend to the next level without being able to reflect back on how we felt during the journey to really see like, all right, like how can I be better in this moment? Because if we consistently are just who we are, we're not going to be able to get to that next level of who we want to be. And that's fine. I believe everyone can kind of be like, all right, yeah, it's kind of good to be like, if my father passes, maybe I should feel what that feels like and kind of try to get over that is probably the worst way to say it. Yet to process it, understand it, and not feel the negative emotions from it, but take away the positives. That's how I would say that. The other side, though, is when I was starting the business, and I believe this is where life becomes very powerful and intentional, is that when I was growing up, I always was about myself, about my own growth. I thought the path to happiness and success was through my growth. So because of that, if I were to ever talk to you guys, I would have never done a podcast like this because I thought it was taking away from my growth. I don't want to talk to these people that want to grow. That's going to take away from me growing, and that's not okay. It was in sports. It was in everything. It's like, I don't want to teach people how to do this. If you suck at it and it's not helping me, I don't want to do it. And over the years, I realized, especially growing the business, that I couldn't grow it without focusing on the other people. And inside of that, as well as I couldn't reach the people, I realized I couldn't relate to people. I thought I was so different than everyone else. I was only focused on my own growth. I was only focused on not looking at all the problems. I thought I really didn't have that many problems. I didn't struggle with eating bad food anymore. I won't even think about that. I wouldn't even show people my overweight photo because I was like so embarrassed that they would look at me for who I was, not who I am today. And I was so embarrassed by all of that I just shoved it in a closet over here. And I was like, this is who I am. This is where I'm going. No one's going to stop me. And I realized that not only did it stunt my own growth, but it actually didn't allow me to relate to anyone else, because it wasn't until I went back to those moments that I had, the struggles that I'd gone through and really felt them, understood them, and were able to communicate them, that I realized that I was no different than anyone else I was talking to, which was super weird, that you can be the same as people that are failing, yet succeed because of different choices and growth. Yet at the same time, it allowed me to finally communicate, empathize, and understand and connect with other people out there that wanted our help that I never could connect to before because I just was never speaking on their level. I was always speaking as if I was up here and, I didn't struggle with all the same things because I truly never thought about it. For people listening right now, if you're like me, which is very achievement, task-oriented in many ways, I needed to know why. I didn't understand how my best path forward to get to where I wanted to be was through helping others. I didn't understand that. And oftentimes we try to scrutinize people's motivations by saying they have to be like, I would say Jeff and Jason, we have all different personality types. And outside of putting it into a box of personality types, we're just different. Like we all have different ways that we may want to get to the same exact place, but because we're not just robots and clones, and we have different fingerprints and different ways that we do life, we all take a different path, which means that when we collaborate together and we share ideas, we come up with better ideas because they're not all just one-sided based on our own path. And ultimately, when I look at, I'm an achievement-based person. I want to win. And there's other people out there that are achievement-based that want to win. That's their number one goal in life. And they're assholes, and they're all about themselves. I'm not any different than them. One thing I want to make true, like no one has to change their ultimate motivation in life. I've just found that it's through the helping the people that I'm able to win and achieve. That's the only difference, is that I've transplanted who I am and my motivations, and I've been okay with them. I've accepted them.
Okay, so what I got from that was curiosity and intention. That's what I got. So those are the two things that you carried through, because your intention, when your intention was to, grow, and when your intention was growth and your own success and your own advancement, you were very focused on that. You did that. You actually moved things out of the way, even if they were people, to get you to that place. And then you saw that it wasn't working. But that didn't change the what you brought to the level of intention for your life. So it sounds like once you realized that there was a different path to the same place, you brought back intention in a new way, so that you could.
Real quick to hit on the intention part, just because I feel like intention was the secondary. Intention's something that's learned. I feel that we can accidentally do it. Yet for me, it was when I started asking myself, so every single day I write down what my intention is. I've been doing this since 2016. And the intention for me isn't the task, it's the overarching theme of the day. How am I showing up? So if I were to write down my intention is to be mindful of my time. That's the overarching theme of the lens that I put on that day. Like, all right, these glasses, it's a daily intention. I'm like, all right, this is the lens I'm going to put on today. And it's usually based on something that I saw myself lacking in the day before. But ultimately, the overarching intention that really helped for me, the first big intention that I had outside of taking responsibility, is I remember sitting in my office one day, and I had this like epiphany that our destiny is found when our passions and our responsibilities overlap. And again, because I'm so passionate and excited about things, people call it an addictive personality. I played one video game for 365 days played. That's why I got 60 pounds overweight in high school. And then I quit motocross racing when I was 21, and I needed something else to fill that void. And so I picked up golfing, and I hit 220 golf balls every day for 18 months. And I played golf 4 days a week, like 36 holes. And I truly believed that at 50, I was going to be pro. So I struggle with believing that I can do things that are totally absurd. I 100% believe that I can be a professional athlete in every single way. So with that, I get myself in trouble because I'm not directing my intention. I'm not doing the sight class. I'm not angling it with the sun and having the energy actually go through to be something powerful. I'm just like reflecting light everywhere. And I'm like, oh, this, that. I get so passionate though that I could cry about it. I cried all the time about being a pro motocross racer. I've cried all the time about being a pro golfer because I could feel it. I could see it, felt it. Yet again, it was not getting me to the path that I wanted to actually be in life. It was not getting me it had no path to get me to the life that I felt that I was supposed to live. And that's where I asked myself, if I were to ask right now for the people listening, what is a responsibility that you have in this world? A responsibility that you have. For me, I was married at 20. My wife was 18. I was about 22 when I was going through this process, and I thought, well, we got kicked out of our house. I tried to live in the back of a halfway home. We finally moved into a one-bedroom apartment, and I thought, this is a responsibility of mine to take care of my family and to set us up for success. What am I doing? Playing golf is not going to get me there. But I've cleaned carpets for so many years, feeling dead inside. I need something that helps me come alive. Oh, that's the passion side. So I got my responsibilities. Make one of a responsibility that most men carry is like, I need to provide for my family. Right? Like that's like a general responsibility. Even if you're not the breadwinner, it's like, oh, okay, if someone's going to break into my home, I'm going to be the one that goes out and is like the first line of defense. Like, let's just put it that way. It's like, all right, like no matter what, even if my wife is 100 times more powerful than me or my partner is 100 times more powerful than me, it's like, I'm going to be the one that goes first. And if they say, one of you needs to die, I'm raising my hand. I'm going, kill me right now as long as they are spared. That's something we all share to be true. And so inside of that, I'm like, all right, that's a responsibility of mine. For me, it was providing for my family. My wife, I want to be that leader that I can provide for her. It's like, but the path I'm taking is just responsibility, which is making me feel dead inside because I'm just handling my responsibilities. That's where the intention came in. I'm like, I'm only going to execute on things where my passion and my responsibilities overlap. That's where I was like, oh, I need to make an impact in these men in the world. I want to speak. It's scary for me because it's not just a passion. It's a responsibility for me. It's a calling. It's something I feel like I've been chosen to do. And all of a sudden, this clarity came where it's like this eclipse of the sun and the moon is like aligned. And I felt that power for the first time, where it was like a magnifying glass in the sun. And I finally got like the angle, But imagine it being the first time. You never knew it was possible. And all of a sudden it lit this fire. I'm like, oh my goodness. So constantly, like, one of the first big intentions that I had that I believe everyone can walk away with was, okay, one, what does it look like? What is an intention for the day that I can set? But where do my passions and my responsibilities overlap in life so that I can sit here and look at what life do I want to design? Because I truly believe that if I were to die, and let's just say for fun, JJ, Jason, and Jeff, that I had to watch your life on repeat for the rest of eternity. I think about this all the time. I watched Rudy. I don't know if you've seen this like football college movie. This guy's terrible at football. Doesn't play at all. Works his like ass off, and literally doesn't do anything. He plays like one play after the game's already over, and it's the most inspirational movie ever. And like all this guy was like a loser failure. Like, what's the deal? And I met Rudy, the real Rudy, to this, so I'm not dogging on him. He knows it. Yet now he's an inspirational speaker and speaks all over the world and has a movie. And like, all you were was a failure. Mm. But I'd rather watch the person who left it all out on the field and fail than the person who lived below his potential. Any day of the week. And so when I think about that in my life, I go, I could always not take the risk. But I feel like all eternity and everyone who's ever lived and ever will live is watching my life on repeat, judging me from afar. And I'd rather them go, oh, did you see them take that risk and fail? Like, man, he went for it. Rather than being the guy that looked and shied away and just decided to die at 25, but get buried at 75. And that's where my passion and my responsibilities overlapped. And that was a lens that I'm putting on all the time. Is this handling both of those sides of my life?
Wow. I feel really good about the choices I've made recently because of what you said. I'm like, yeah, I'm laying it all on the table. Like, we're just going to go for it because
Kickstarter, for instance, like how awesome it, like that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Putting yourself out there vulnerable, you could have lost.
That's
right?
real.
You could have not. I mean, now it's cool because you're like, oh, I got 18K already on my Kickstarter, and maybe more.
I have not completed, but it's something I've done before. But it's literally like, look, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things going on right now, and for me to every day make a video like in joy and celebration of like where I am, irregardless of like what is happening in the world, is very difficult because to me it feels insensitive. It feels like how do you address the things that are going on and be in integrity with like, but my intention for that Kickstarter is not to raise, X amount of dollars. My intention for the Kickstarter is to create a program that brings diversity to science fiction and also provides literature to disenfranchised youth in certain communities. So, and it will specifically BIPOC communities. So it's bigger than me. And so I think that's what helps bring the joy. But it was very much I can either play small and like not do this because of the circumstances. Oh, it's COVID. And, there's like, I could have canceled it because of the winter storm, because I was like, oh, people aren't going to want to, pledge for this. Or I see the vision and I see my intention behind bringing this to life is bigger than what it is that is going on or what the circumstances are, or even how I feel it will look for me to be the one doing it. So that was really powerful. The idea of looking at something and having it be scary and say, I'm not going to do that thing. I'm just going to do this over here instead. Versus looking at something and saying, it's scary, but, is my intention bigger than the space between what I want and where I am?
Isn't it so cool how you define even yours, though, that you put on that lens of it's not about raising the money, but it's about this bigger vision that you had? Yet that bigger vision is actually going to raise you more money than if you were about the money, because that's not your motivation. Yeah. Whereas other people make it seem like, oh, we need to raise this much. And you're like, okay, I get that, but like, this is my path that I'm taking. And if I truly execute on this path, it's also going to produce this result over here as a byproduct. Mm-hmm. And I love that was like, again, that's what you're looking through is For me, intention's all about lens. It's the way that I'm viewing the world. It's the way that I'm viewing every situation. It's the way that I view everything in my life. I just thought that was really cool how you just showed exactly how that shows up for you, which I think is really amazing. I think, did you just hit that button on your phone that makes it like
I don't know. I was trying to turn it off, and I was like, "What's happening?"
That's our, you know, we got a whole podcast unit over here with sound effects that we're just ready to put in.
Oh my
at any
God,
point in
can you
time.
imagine if we were one of those radio shows? Pew, pew, pew. Those weird noises.
You know, there's something that I'm really getting from this conversation, Nicholas, which is, you know, I think how I want to frame it is that we already know all this stuff. We just don't practice it. Like, it's not like sometimes it's not just a matter of, oh, I learned something new, but it's reactivating something that's out of practice. And what I'm really getting from what you shared, and Jason, what you shared is like, first of all, like, intention is an active game. Because if you don't play it actively, then your passive intentions are going to actually run it for you. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, so like, that's one is like, what's the active game that you want to play for you? And just like anything with a game, the more you practice, the more you get better at it. So whether you're getting on motocross, whether you're going and grabbing 220 golf balls and going to there, like, it's all a matter of how you're showing up at inside of the practice too. And what I'm really getting is that what makes the difference is commitment, it's consistency, and it's a willingness to like not get it right, a willingness to not, you know, worry about the fear of failing. I mean, Jason, you said something about how, you know, like, who am I to be showing up with joy and celebration? I mean, when you were showing up at joy and celebration, Nicholas was digging holes in his backyard, which I'm sure he can actually talk about just very briefly. He's down in Texas. He's in Austin, Texas. Like, he was in the impact of this winter storm when it all went down. And so who he had to, the things that he had to change were something that I don't think was on his radar, but he still chose to show up. From what I got to see and being in conversation with him, he still got to choose who he wanted to show up as on a daily basis. So I think it's like this idea of like, who you were yesterday is great, and who do you want to be today? So practicing that over and over and over, practicing the art of intention, because if you don't actively practice it, if I don't actively practice it, then just, you know, why bother? So when you were talking about joy and celebration, for me, it's like, oh, I don't want to actively practice putting more joy and celebration in the world. I'm like, why the hell not? Because like, this world needs more joy and celebration. You need more joy and celebration. I need more joy and celebration. Our listeners, like our families, all of that need more. And if like you get to be the one to put it in where it's missing, to me is like one of the most powerful intentions that one can have. To be what's missing in the world is like this ultimate merge of responsibility and intention and passion, like all together. So that's just like how it shows up for me when you guys were all talking. It's like, oh my gosh, this is like the merging of these conversations is beautiful.
Not to mention, we're bigger jerks than you could ever imagine, because it wasn't until we actually started reporting on all the things that are going on in the world that we realized how much stuff is going on. Even growing up, kids were going through really bad things when you were smiling. Like we've been the biggest assholes all along, but actually it's not. But in the definition of, man, there's so much stuff going on, do I really want to talk about this like subject when people are dying over here or going through this oppression over here? It's like, well, I mean, look at genocides and holocausts and all these things that have gone on and people that are affected from that forever. And it's like, we didn't know it until it was widely reported. Like, we only knew what happened in our city. And generally, we didn't even know that because we're like having to get a newspaper and all these different things. Now we're seeing what's going on. And I love the quote that's like the thing that makes the world basically crumbles when good men do nothing. Right? It's like they just don't do anything. They don't show up. They don't say anything. And also on top of that, knowing how to like stay in your lane. It's easy to look at all the things that are going on in the world that are really, really bad. And I had people come up and say, man, I haven't been to post because it's so political out there. Like, I just can't even post anything. I don't even know what to say. And they get so overwhelmed. And I had this with like COVID. I was like, when it first hit, I got to get educated. I need to know how to talk to everyone about this. And then it's like the next thing, the next thing, the next. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can really actually get sidetracked from where am I supposed to make my little dent by getting sidetracked by everything that's going on in the world, because now it's so accessible, right? You can go to automaticearth.com, which is something that a mentor of mine showed me. It's like compiled articles from all these different sites that kind of try to give you the most unbiased opinion on what's going on and compile what's going on in the world. And every day I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. And then there's obviously so good as well. Yet it's easy to, especially as men, I feel that deep inside of us for a very long time is that innate wanting to come alive through having purpose in distress. You know, there's like, when I was in Las Vegas, when that shooter did like the huge shooting, 500 wounded or whatever it was.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was wild. Yet in that moment, I was clearing the hotels with a fireman. And I felt so alive because I was like, this is needed right now. People need someone to go out there and do something. And when we allow that to, there's always something, that's where boundaries come in and staying focused. And it can feel really bad because it's really difficult to say yes if we don't know what we've said no to. Like if we can't say yes until we say no. And when those
we gotta
come
stop.
in, like,
we gotta stop because that was so good. That was really good.
Yeah, we can't say yes until we know what we said no to. And it gets harder. More successful you get, more family you get, relationship growth, whatever it is. It's like now with my son, it's a whole new human being that I'm going to be intentional. Even think about that word, intention. People go, okay, but what is it when someone's intentional? Well, it means that they're like putting their focus on it. They're being aware of it. It's something of high priority to them. And so when we look at someone who's being intentional, it's like a whole nother thing. It's like, well, I need to prioritize, set boundaries around the things that are most important to me. So when I look at like the inside of my day, when you have nothing going on, it's very easy to be intentional, have priorities. Like when I was single, I'd like wake up, go to the gym, eat breakfast, eat healthy, and get my stuff done. And it's like, oh, and then I got married, and then I had a kid, and then and now I run a community, and I have obligations and all these things that I've said yes to, and now the power of saying no, which I really dislike. It's just so difficult to like. People think they start becoming assholes, and they just say no about everything. Like, oh, I need to say no to that because I'm just being very intentional and being very careful with my time. And I'm like, no, you're being a jerk, and like you're swinging way to the other side. Yet it's very difficult to say no if we don't know what we've said yes to or the opposite. And so for me, that's what it's always been about. Is for my community, it'd be very difficult to show up if I'm worried about all these things in the world that I don't know about. Like it was GameStop last week, and it was COVID the week before that, and then the winter storm, and I'm stuck here. And I'm like, there's always something that can push me in the ocean like a ship without a rudder. And I would say like the intention and like your vision is like the rudder in the storm. It's the way to direct the sail. It's like there's always wind and all this stuff going on. And I'm like, cool. Like what's going to keep me on track is going to be like the rudder and like the sail. And I'm going to have direction of where this thing's going, because I feel like the world can direct us sometimes. Look at social media.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about the same thing, which means they're being controlled by information because they're only talking about it because they heard it or read it from somewhere else. And they're not allowing things to come from like here, and they're being the one who are directing conversation. And I feel that for the people listening, this is something that we all go through. You just talked about going through it as well, Jason. It's like you felt almost bad. And I've felt those same exact things. So I don't want to act like, oh, I've just been perfect at it. Yet, you have to ask yourself again as a leader. It's like, what happens if I don't show up?
I mean,
what happens if I don't get the message out there?
Yeah.
What happens if I don't try? And so again, good job for doing it no matter what. And I felt like, oh, why does anyone care about sales if like all this other stuff's going on? Why do people care about these other things if all these other things are going on in the world? And ultimately, as leaders, like the time will never be good. There will never be the right time. And so good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we need a part two because this is good.
It's too
I
good.
feel like we have a lot to discuss. I want to wrap up.
Let's do the part two. I think that makes it fun for
Yeah.
everyone, and it gives us a chance to reflect on everything, come back with like a fresh perspective, and
Yeah.
that'd be cool.
Well, and we got to come back with different outfits too. That's like the important thing, so we can make sure to cut them together. Clear delineation.
You'll never see me wear the same thing twice. Okay.
Impressive.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah, you take it away.
Awesome. Well, so Nicholas, one of the things that we love to do, there's been so much value in this conversation, and I think you preach this as well as we do, which is that insight without application is just good information. So the inspiration that we're planning on bringing to everybody is really take a listen to what you got and be willing to do something about it. Like Nicholas pointed to, and I think what we stand for is like leadership is always a choice. There's always an option moment to moment. You can always set a new intention. You can always show up as a leader. And so we want people to take that in for themselves. And one of the ways that we want to do that is to really identify, well, what did we get for ourselves from being in this conversation, whether it's something completely brand new or it's something that just got rekindled and floated back to the surface that you think would be applicable to your life. So Nicholas, I'd love to hear just from even being in this conversation, what did you get for yourself from today's conversation?
It's a great question. The big thing again is like intention is the lens that we look through, and even looking at every single day of what I've gone through with all these changes and obviously some pushback of no internet, no water, stores being empty, waiting in lines for hours, is that at the end of the day, the basis point of transformation is taking responsibility and not giving power to other people to change your situation, meaning that you could still get help. Yet oftentimes we kind of pawn off the power. We hope that, oh man, my job or this person will change my situation. And really at the end of the day, it's like, for me, it's like, I got to take responsibility for those situations. I remember when power went out, I'm like, man, I don't have water, but they'll figure it out. They'll turn it back on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's anxiety because I'm not taking responsibility and saying, what can I do in this instance? How can I have an intention, take responsibility to change my situation, even if the water company doesn't do it for me? And it just bled over again today where I'm asking myself again, what is my intention for the day? And what are the things in my life that I'm experiencing that aren't getting done, that are causing a little bit of anxiety or stress? And how can I take responsibility for them so I can take the power back, which actually will decrease the anxiety and stress? It's proven. Taking on responsibility actually decreases anxiety and pressure, not releasing responsibility, which is what most people think. When I'm done working, if I had enough money, if I never have to do a thing again in my life, then I'll feel peaceful. And it's not, look at the retirement stats. Most people die within a few short years after retiring because they just don't have any responsibilities anymore. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
How about you, Jason?
I want to go last. No, it's fine. I'm kidding. I won't be a brat. Okay. Well, my intention for this conversation was to connect with Nicholas, and I'm genuinely surprised, even though I'm not. I'm genuinely surprised how much in common, how in common we are. That kind of self-serving mentality that I adopted to move through the world because I thought that I needed to protect myself to get ahead, to be successful. And in those ways, I had very shallow connections around me. And then realizing that, in the space that I'm in right now, realizing the power of connection and my intention to have powerful connections has kind of manifested in so many places. One, in the success of my Kickstarter, my book series, and this podcast, being born, being willing to embark on a really deep partnership with Jeff. So yeah, I definitely get the power of intention, and so that's what I'm taking away. The power of intention.
Nice.
And how that shows up in my life right now. Okay, Jeff.
Nice. Few key points. the new piece was looking at the idea of where current responsibilities meet passion, and also realizing that it's an equation that can evolve. Like Nicholas, you were pointing to the fact that like when I had responsibilities as a single person and I had these passions, it could look, the overlap, the Venn diagram looked differently than when Amanda came in, right? And then when the Brotherhood started to get built, and then when Kingston was born, and then moving to Texas, like all of this thing is an opportunity to reassess and reinvent. And it's not necessarily, the intention doesn't necessarily change, but it's just like who you show up as inside of it is what makes a difference. And that it's constant. It's an everyday thing. Like, who do I want to be? Could be different than yesterday. I like that. You kind of pointed to, well, I just want to shift a little bit from who I was yesterday. I think this comparison game that I know I can get trapped in, which is comparing myself to other people, like comparing myself to Nicholas and what he's built, like comparing myself to Jason on his Kickstarter videos and being like, man, where is my ability to be like that charismatic with what I'm creating? But I can compare myself to nobody else. But if I just compare myself to who I was yesterday, then it's an opportunity to actually step in and grow. So I'd like to kind of take that on, that passion versus responsibility, and actually take that on as an exercise, make a list of all my responsibilities, the way my life looks, looking at my passions, and start to look at the intersection points to how that can actually create transformation on purpose, because then I'm actually responsible for what's in the middle there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
that transformation actually gives you the ability to do whatever you want as well, which
totally.
is another battle that you fight, is when you can have passions and hobbies again. But when I built my business, I had none for years. I didn't allow myself to do anything. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, like this has opened me up to be able to do things that I enjoy. That was the next phase of learning, which was, how do I actually enjoy the things that I didn't allow myself to enjoy for so long?
Yeah. Well, and I would even challenge you on that. Like, your passion became building the business. So it just, like, the hobby was, or the passion actually was still there. It just showed up differently.
100%. But I love being out in wilderness and doing action sports things. And I didn't allow myself to do that for years. And all of a sudden I was like, you know, even with sex, oftentimes people that are brought up in a household that demonize sex, like you can't have sex, can't have sex, can't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. They don't shift. They then are like, oh, okay, this is the person that I love. They still look at sex as bad, and they struggle for years, if not their whole life, because of this. You don't have this switch where you go, don't do this, don't do this. Don't do these hobbies, don't do these hobbies, don't get distracted. And then I'm like, oh, I want to do something I enjoy again. Then I feel bad. You know, it's like, well, that's because I've taught myself that this is bad. And I believe that something you touched on that I just wanted to hit on is like, there's also that side of it as well, is don't expect to sit there and be like, I'm not going to ever do this again. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. And then finally you want to go enjoy yourself and go on a hike. Dude, you're going to feel so bad because for the last 10 years, you've conditioned yourself hiking bad. No, it's not bad. You're just choosing right now to put it over here so that you can focus on the things that you're intentional about, so that you can have all these things over here. Because whatever you give up, this will be the cap. Whatever you give up in life in the name of success for yourself, you'll always get something better in return on the other side. So if you give up the golfing, well, now I can golf anytime I want. Like, I gave it up and I focused on the things that were most important, and I got that and more. I realized that nothing that I ever give up do I not get something better in return, as long as it's done with the right intention.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm still standing for your professional athletic career, by the way.
One day I'll have something. That's one of my goals in life, is that I have something that I go pro in that isn't business, because that's my profession, but something like that I just compete. I like to compete. Love competing. Oh my gosh.
Love competing, which means you love to win.
I'm literally going go-kart racing at one with Alex Charfin and a bunch of other entrepreneurs here. We're racing go-karts because I'm like, I got to race someone. Let's go.
That's amazing. Ooh, that'll be fun. I love go-karting. Okay. Well, thank you, Nicholas, for coming on. I'm looking forward to our part 2 conversation. To our listeners, if you got something for yourself, which we know you did, we'd love to hear about it. And we have a place where you can do that. So there, we champion celebration and acknowledgement. And so we invite you to step into being a gentleman today and join our private Facebook group. And we'll see you on our next episode.